Hi guys, and welcome back to another fly fishing video. Well, May is just around the corner and it offers every kind of angler a fantastic opportunity to get into some great sport. Regardless of rivers, small stillwaters or large reservoirs, May is the month to get yourself out in the fresh air fishing. So, let's have a look at 5 flies that's going to serve you well in May. And without further ado, let's get into it. Well, May's got to be one of my favourite times of the year to go fishing. The weather's generally settled down, the days are much warmer and longer, and the vegetation's coming into its summer colours. It really is a great time to get out there and enjoy everything that fly fishing has to offer. Well, in weeks gone by we've had some outstanding sport on lures and buzzers. But in May they can be kept to the back of the fly boxes. Now, I'm not saying that these lures and buzzers will stop working, I just think there are other ways to get into some great sport. As the water starts to warm up and more insects are hatching off, and the fish will start to explore the water columns looking for likely meals. What am I looking for in my flies for the month of May? Well, I like to use a more medium wire hook, and a great hook for this is the Hanak H130. This one's at size 12. They're finished on a black nickel and they're on a medium wire, which means they're going to just slow down that sink rate a little more. Now, with the dressings on these flies, that's going to keep your flies in the taking zone for a much longer period of time. This, of course, gives the fish a lot more opportunity to find your flies. Be sure to watch to the end and I'll explain some of my favourite ways of presenting and fishing these flies. Fly number 1 then, the muskins. Well, I came across this fly, as ever, in a match, and I was on the wrong end of a hiding from an angler called Andy Haskins. Now, what had happened, I'd had a particularly good day at Grapham the day before, but the next day during the match, the fish just weren't at the bottom of the wind. Andy convinced me to go to the top of the wind, and when we got there, a lot of his teammates were sitting on their hands, which is always a surefire sign that there's plenty of fish in the area. After a quick discussion with his teammates, Andy switched to 4 of these muskins on his cast and proceeded to put a lot of fish in the boat very quickly, while I lay at the other end of the boat crying into my giant pillow because I just couldn't get the same kind of action. Andy was very kind. He gave me the fly at the end, swearing me to secrecy at the time. This was a long time ago. The muskins is obviously a very popular pattern now, but back then it was a fairly closely guarded secret. But it's a great fly. I often tie it with a green collar as well. It works just as well, not only in the black, but in the natural pheasant tail fibres. I tie these flies anywhere from size 10 down to a size 14, and on their day, when it's really working well, I'm more than happy to fish 3 or 4 of the same pattern. It'll descend slowly, which is what I'm looking for in the month of May, and fish absolutely love it. Fly number 2 then, the cruncher. It needs no introduction from me. It's a really popular fly, both with small stillwater and large reservoir anglers alike. If you haven't got these in the box, then you really are missing out. I like to tie mine on size 10, again down to size 14. Size 12 is probably my staple. I like to fish them, if I'm fishing nymphs straight through, I'll often put a cruncher at size 10 on the point, with smaller flies up from there. It's a superb fish catcher, and if you want to be fishing in them upper layers, that hackled front really slows the fly's descent down in the water column. It can be absolutely lethal on its day, and I certainly wouldn't be without a number of different varieties of this fly. A couple of notable variants is the Nemo Cruncher, and I do have another one that I really like to fish, which has a UV thorax, and I've found that very effective throughout the month of May. Fly number 3 then. I don't really have a name for this fly. I call it the Grapham Wet because that's just how I refer to it. But basically it's a red tagged wet fly, and I came across it not by accident. I obviously tied the fly to go fishing with in the hope that it was going to do me a service one day, and that day came on a practice day when I was fishing the Peregrine 4-man team event, which no longer exists, sadly. Like many competitions, they come for a few years and then sadly the sponsors pack up, or they just don't get enough interest to carry on. But the Peregrine was a great event. It was a 4-man team event, which meant you didn't have to get so many of your mates together to enter. And I was practicing with a chap called Mark McGuinness at the time, who was a member of the army team. And we were having a pretty mediocre day at Grapham, and I put this fly on and it absolutely changed our day. We had a bumper session and went on to do quite well in the competition the day after. Now, it worked really well in May. It kind of drops off, for me anyway, in July. So May and June is the time to really use this fly. It works well on other reservoirs. It's not just Grapham water. I've had great success with it at Buell, Rutland, Chew. It just seems to be one of them generic sort of flies that fish do like. Now, as it's got the red tag, I do like to fish this one on the top dropper. I don't much put it anywhere else unless I'm fishing it between two lures as a middle pattern, but I like it on the top dropper when I'm nymphing, and it can score big time. When the fish are on it, it's a devastating pattern. Fly number 4 then, the good old hare's ear. It's as old as the wheel, and it's obviously survived the test of time for good reason. Now, there is 100 different variations of hare's ears. The one I'm showing you here is, I put a little red collar in it just to act as a hot spot for the fish, or a trigger point if you like, and it can be absolutely superb on its day. Now, a word of caution about the hare's ear. Some anglers love it, other anglers loathe it. So it's one of them sort of flies, a bit Marmite if you like. It can be really good, and if you've got confidence in it, it'll score well for you. If you're a little unconfident in it, then you're not going to catch any fish. Confidence plays a key part in fly fishing, and if you're not confident with what you've got on the end of your line, you're not likely to catch many fish. But for me, it certainly has its day, and it's a pattern, certain ones that I have enormous confidence in. So definitely worth having in your box in May, and worth giving a swim. Fly number 5 then, the damsel nymph. Now, the damsel nymph has a great following amongst the small water stillwater anglers. It also does very well on the large reservoirs, and they really start to come into their own in May. The pattern I'm showing you here is one that's been of great success for me over the years. As a general rule, I will always fish this pattern on the point of a team of either 3 or 4 flies. With the damsel on the point, I would have a dial back or a cruncher above it, and then maybe an attractor pattern such as a blob or the red tag fly that we've seen previously in the list. So what makes the damsel so effective? Well, for one thing, it's a big old meal for a hungry trout. They are locked onto it. If there's damsel nymph in the water, it won't be long before the trout turn their attention to it and they'll be hard on it. The other thing, of course, is the marabou tail gives such a fantastic amount of movement to the fly, and if you've got a soft hackle at the front, that all helps with the movement, and it can be a superb way of fishing. Now, a lot of stillwaters only allow anglers to fish one fly, and many of the small stillwaters I visit, very often this will definitely get a look on my cast very early, because it will indicate whether you're overfish or not, because even if you don't catch them, you'll certainly get plenty of takes with a damsel. Well, that's my top 5 selection for the month of May. Am I missing out on any? Let me know in the comments section below. Now, as a general rule, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, I like to fish my nymphs on a floating line. But obviously, conditions on the day will dictate what fly line you decide to use. I'm more than happy to fish a midge tip to get a better presentation of my flies. If I want to fish my nymphs a little deeper, I'm more than happy to have around 10 foot of tippet from my fly line to my first fly. This also helps facilitate changing lines very quickly. I can wind in my line and have the tippet almost at the bottom rod ring, change over the fly line, pull it through, and I'm immediately fishing again with a different fly line. This is not always the answer though, because if you have 10 foot of tippet, you are eventually going to be fishing at a fairly deep depth, depending on the speed of retrieve. But if you want to fish much higher in the water column, I'll often cut down to just 4 feet of tippet from my fly line to my top dropper. And this will keep my whole team of flies quite high in the water. Again, depending on the speed of your retrieve. Now, the flies I've shown you here today can be mixed and matched on a cast of 3 or 4 flies, except for the damsel. Generally, I would only fish the damsel on the point, but you might know different. Again, just let me know in the comments section below. When fishing the nymphs, I'll often mix it up by putting a blob on the top dropper. This can bring fish into your cast. Now, they may not always take the blob, but sometimes they will turn and look at what's behind, and that's when the nymphs will score. They've refused the blob, they'll take the nymphs. You can also try fishing them under an indicator or a bung. When the fish wants a static presentation, there is nothing that can outdo this method. Last then, but certainly not least, is putting a buoyant fly such as a fab or a booby on the point of your cast, and you'll be fishing the washing line. This can be an absolutely devastating method, and it's employed by some of the best anglers in the country. Now, if you want to find out more about the washing line, you can check out this video here, and if you've got a bit of time on your hands, this will give you a much more in-depth view of the washing line. Thanks for watching the video, folks, and please don't forget to leave it a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all next time.